My name is Fallon Mercer. On the day I turned 30 years old, my family did not throw me a normal birthday party. There were no balloons tied to mailbox, no paper plates with frosting smeared across them, no cousins running around in the backyard with their shoes untied. Instead, when I walked around the side of my parents' house that evening, I found 40 gray metal chairs arranged in careful rows on the grass, all of them facing a single empty chair that had been set apart from the rest. There was a microphone on a shiny silver pole. There was a large plastic sign, zip-tied to back fence. My mother was standing at that microphone, holding it with both hands like it might try to escape, and she had the particular look on her face that she only gets when she has been rehearsing something in front of a bathroom mirror for several days in a row. My sister Sloane was off to one side with a big ring light, glowing white, and a phone already lifted and already recording. My father was standing near the back of the yard, holding a thick stack of yellow legal paper, both sides of every single page covered in handwriting. I had driven over from my grandmother's farmhouse, thinking there might be potato salad and a store-bought cake. Instead, I found a trial, and I was the only one who hadn't been told that was what was that. I sat down in the chair they pointed me to. I didn't say a word. I kept my hands still on my knees. Because I was being so quiet, I think they believed I had nothing to say. They were wrong about that. What my family did not know, what none of the 40 people sitting in those rented funeral chairs knew, was that I had spent the previous 6 weeks preparing. I had built something careful and solid, something that their sign and their microphone and their rehearsed speeches were not going to be able to stand against. I had been back home from my overseas deployment with the Army for exactly 3 weeks at that point. 3 weeks had been just enough time for me to understand what had happened to my grandmother while I was gone. The invitation they sent me said to arrive at 6 o'clock. It said it would be casual, just a small family thing. I drove over from the farmhouse where my grandmother Ruth had lived for most of her life and where I had been staying since I returned. I noticed 9 cars in the driveway and along the street that I didn't recognize. The garage was wide open and someone had strung up little lights along the rafters. For one small moment, standing at the edge of the driveway in the early evening, I felt something warm move through me. I thought that maybe they had really missed me. I thought they were trying to show me they were glad I was home. But then I walked around the side of the house and saw the chairs. I looked at the rows of people the way I used to look at a stretch of road before we moved out on a mission. I counted heads. I checked the exits. I noticed who didn't belong. My Aunt Lynn was standing near the gate, holding a stack of printed papers. There were 2 people I recognized from our church. And then, in the very back row, I spotted a woman in a plain cardigan sweater that I recognized from the administrative office at Maple Grove, which is a care facility 25 minutes away where my grandmother had been placed while I was overseas. A woman from that office had no reason to be at my birthday party. I noted this, and I said nothing that my mother tapped the microphone twice. The speakers made a hollow popping sound, and everyone fell quiet. She thanked people for coming. She said this was very difficult, but that the family loved me too much to stay silent. She said some of them had known me since I was born, and that made what she was about to say even harder. Then she looked directly at me and said I was being selfish and ungrateful, that I was tearing the family apart. She let those words hang in the air over the yard. People in the chairs nodded with slow, mournful expressions, the kind people have when they've already been told who the villain is before the story begins. My sister shifted her ring light, so it shone directly onto my face. The small red on her phone told me she was broadcasting everything live. I did not move. When you serve in the military, you learn that when someone tries to ambush you, the most dangerous thing you can do is react without thinking. You hold your position. You let the situation develop. So I held mine at why Father came to the microphone next. He unfolded his yellow legal pages, and he started reading. He began with a story from when I was 8 years old and broke a bicycle without apologizing properly. He worked his way forward through time, cataloging every mistake, every absence, every moment he felt I had fallen short. The people in the chairs made soft sounds of sympathy. Some shook their heads. My father read for 11 full minutes. He didn't know he was building a record of his own version of events, one that I would be able to compare against the documented truth I had in the folder sitting in my bag. I let him finish every word. MY's sister Sloane stepped up after him, still filming. She said, with genuine-looking sadness in her voice, that I had taken grandmother's money and refused to let the family help her care. And then she said something she shouldn't have said. She said they couldn't even sell grandmother's house because of me. That was when the shape of the whole thing became completely clear. They wanted the house. The savings were already gone, and now they wanted the property too. This party was designed to shame me publicly until I gave up the legal authority my grandmother had granted me and signed everything over to them. I need to explain what that legal authority actually was and how it came to exist. For years earlier, while my grandmother was still sharp independent, still driving herself to the grocery store and beating me at card games on the porch, she sat down with a lawyer and made me her power of attorney. That is a legal arrangement by which she designated me as the person responsible for her finances and medical decisions if she ever became unable to manage them herself. She chose me specifically because I was the only member of the family who had never once asked her for money. We completed the paperwork properly and officially. I kept my copy in a safe. When I deployed overseas, I trusted my family to honor that arrangement, because you are supposed to trust your family. My mother told me on video calls that the bills were being paid and that grandmother was comfortable and happy. I believed her. When I arrived at the farmhouse 3 weeks before the party, the house was empty in a way that made my chest feel hollow. Every photograph had been removed from the walls. The telephone didn't work. But on the kitchen counter, I found a pile of mail that nobody had bothered to clear away. I sat at that kitchen table late at night, drinking coffee and going through it piece by piece. Most of it was ordinary. And then I found a bank envelope that hadn't been opened. I opened it and read the statement inside very carefully. It didn't take long to find the withdrawals. For $1,000 taken out 1 month, $6,000 the next, $11,000 transferred to an account I had never seen before. All of it happening while I was deployed on the other side of the world. That I called my mother the next morning and stayed very calm. I asked about the money. She paused too long before answering. Then she said that caring for grandmother was expensive and that they had done what was necessary. I said the numbers didn't match the cost of the care facility. She said my father had been handling the paperwork and that I shouldn't worry about it. Then she hung up. That I drove to the bank and asked to speak with the branch manager. What he showed me stopped my breath for a moment. There was a document on file, submitted the previous month, that had reassigned authority over my grandmother's accounts. My name appeared at the bottom of that document in blue ink, but it was not my handwriting. I had been in a military deployment zone the month that signature was supposedly made. It was a forgery. The bank manager understood quickly that a serious error had been made in accepting it. He gave me copies of everything. I also had help from my cousin Maya, the one person in the family who'd been quietly decent to me while I was away. She met me at a coffee shop looking nervous and showed me a group chat on her phone that I wasn't supposed to know existed. The chat was called Mercer Real Ones. I read through the messages. Everything was there. They had discussed which care facility was cheapest and how to prevent me from visiting. My father had written that he would handle the signature. My mother had written that I wouldn't find out until it was too late. Someone had posted a photograph of the farmhouse listed for sale online. They had been planning all of it, and they had planned this party as a final step. The public humiliation that would pressure me into surrendering the power of attorney and giving them legal access to sell the house. I told Maya to save every one of those messages somewhere safe. Then I went back to the farmhouse and kept looking. In a closet, I found an old hat box. Inside was a calendar my grandmother had kept for herself. On the date they moved her to Maple Grove, she had written 4 words in her careful handwriting. I did not agree. My grandmother was not confused. She was not diminished. She was a witness to what was being done to her, and she had recorded it the only way she could. I took everything I had found to a lawyer. The bank statements, the forged signature, the group chat messages, the calendar. The lawyer told me that what had been done to my grandmother was elder financial abuse, that it was a serious crime, and that the forged signature represented additional criminal exposure for whoever had created it. She asked me what I wanted to do. I could have handled it privately. I could have made quiet phone calls and sent formal letters and kept the whole thing inside the family. But my family had rented 40 chairs. They had invited neighbors and church members and a woman from the care home. They had set up a ring light and a live broadcast. They had decided to make this a public event. So I decided to give them exactly the kind of public event they had prepared for A.T. the party. After my father finished his 11 minutes of accusations, and my mother walked toward me with a pen and a paper and told me in her gentlest church voice that I should just sign it and let the family help, I stood up. My chair scraped loud against the patio stone. I did not take the pen she was holding out to me. I asked one question, clearly and without any emotion in my voice. Who signed the bank document last month? My father's face went the color of old ash. My mother's smile stayed on her face but stopped moving, like something had switched off behind it. I told everyone present that my name had been forged on a legal document while I was serving overseas. I said I had the documentation in my bag. The yard went completely silent. That M.Y. mother said I was fabricating things. My father stepped toward me and put his hand on my folder and asked me quietly to stop. He said they were just trying to pay the bills. Then he turned back to the crowd and started talking over me again, trying to retake the room. That was when I stopped being patient, that I opened the folder. I showed the bank statements and explained that $71,000 had been removed from my grandmother's accounts. I showed that while the family was collecting that money, they had placed her in the least expensive room available and instructed the staff to prevent me from visiting. The woman from the care home, who had been sitting in the back row the whole time with a brown folder on her lap, confirmed that the family had given those exact instructions. The people in the chairs were no longer nodding with sympathy. They were looking at my parents that I showed the forged signature and asked my father to explain whose handwriting it was. He didn't answer. He became loud and angry and knocked my birthday cake off the table. Everyone watched him do that. I read selections from the group chat out loud, including the message where my mother wrote that I wouldn't find out until it was too late, and the message where they discussed a house sale. After that, the gathering dissolved. The pastor got up and walked out without saying a word. My Aunt Lynn, who had spent the evening handing out printed documents about what a bad daughter I was, turned on my mother. My sister's boyfriend left before the night was over. My parents looked at each other across the ruined yard like they were strangers. I did not sign their paper. I told them the farmhouse was not for sale. I told them that the police and the county's Adult Protective Services had already been made aware of the forged documents and the missing funds. Then I picked up my bag and my folder, and I drove back to the farmhouse. The house came off the real estate market the next morning. The Adult Protective Services investigation opened within days. My father retained a criminal attorney. Because of the forged signature, my mother and her sister stopped speaking. Sloane's live stream stayed on the internet long enough that people from our town, and eventually people who didn't know any of us at all, saw exactly what she had participated in. But the part one thing about most is simpler than any of that. I went back to Maple Grove, and I brought my grandmother home. I arranged for a home health aide to come each weekday. I had the porch repainted. The same soft gray it had always been. My grandmother sat in her old chair on that porch for the first time in over a year and looked out at her own yard and her own trees and breathed the air of her own place. My cousin Maya visits us on weekends now. Grandmother and I drink tea in the evening and watch the light change over the fields. She told me she was so glad I came home. I told her I had always been with her, even when I was far away. I meant I teed that M.Y. family believed that 40 chairs and a microphone and a live camera could write the ending of this story. What they actually did was gather 40 witnesses to the truth. I kept records. I stayed calm. I came home. And my grandmother got her porch back. If this story reminds you to look after people you love and to keep your paperwork somewhere safe, then I am glad I told it.